Well, good morning again, everyone. Let's begin this morning in Cuba in the springtime in 1834. It's early in the morning, and a young woman is writing a letter home to her mother in Salem, Massachusetts. March 11th. This morning, dearest mother, when I opened my window, I found a mist over everything here, but it was only a new aspect of beauty. The sun rose in a flush of gold, and soon the vapor rose from the ground and laid along in level rolls. If anything so light can be said to lay and change to a golden color as it passed away, I felt it upon my cheek, and such a fragrant bath seemed too delicious, too delicate, and ethereal for any disembodied spirit. The young writer was named Sophia Peabody. On a starlit morning the previous December, Sophia's sister Mary rose early to inspect her trunk before setting sail from Boston Harbor bound for Cuba. She had been offered a position as a governess with a physician's family outside of Havana, and now the 27-year-old was venturing out on an 18-month journey into the unknown. Accompanying her was Sophia, a talented writer and artist whose ability to work had been curtailed by frequent debilitating migraines. Her oldest sister, Elizabeth, had arranged for her passage to Cuba in the hope that the trip would prove to be restorative. The plan for the trip was for Mary to teach while Sophia convalesced in the island's healthful climate. Almost immediately, Sophia's health improved. She began writing letters home, the first in a series of descriptive accounts that eventually came to be known as the Cuba Journal. In its entirety, the journal contained 56 letters and numbered more than 900 pages. Most of the correspondence was addressed to her mother, but it soon gained a wider readership thanks to Elizabeth, who, tireless as ever, copied and distributed them to at least 25 friends back at home. Sophia Peabody's Cuba Journal is considered the earliest example of Transcendentalist nature writing, anticipating Thoreau's Walden and Emerson's Nature by several years. Her journal captivated Transcendentalists such as the Alcotts and the Emersons and William Ellery Channing. You may have never heard of Sophia, or you may have only heard of her as a painter, or perhaps as Nathaniel Hawthorne's wife. We would have more of Sophia's writings if, once wed, Nathaniel had not, and I quote, burned great heaps of old letters and other papers preparatory to going to England. Among them were hundreds of Sophia's. But the writing we do have of Sophia's helps us to see the beauty in nature, the beauty in really looking, the beauty in something as simple as sunlight itself. Her writing was foundational, changing what people could see, but ultimately hardly recognized. Sophia is the first of 4 women I'd like you to get to know this morning. Women who, although they lived in the shadows, gave us light and helped us to see nature, see beauty, the stars, possibility, and the truth itself. About a century after Sophia was putting her relationship with nature into words in Cuba, a young woman named Cecilia Payne was peering through telescopes and at photographic plates at Harvard College, examining starlight in a very different way. Cecilia connected the newly emerging field of quantum mechanics with astronomy to discover that stars are made primarily of hydrogen and helium. This may not be surprising to us today, but in the early 20th century, it was believed that stars shared the same elemental makeup as the Earth. In 1925, Cecilia presented her astonishing findings in her thesis, but few believed her science was correct. In fact, Henry Norris Russell, possibly the most influential and well-known astronomer in America at that time, informed Cecilia that her results were clearly impossible and pressured her to downplay her discovery. To protect her career, Cecilia included a disclaimer in her thesis that her results were almost certainly not real. 4 years later, Henry derived the same results, published them, was believed, and received the credit and accolades. The new understanding of the composition of stars opened new avenues of discovery and understanding about the formation of our sun, solar system, and the universe. Meanwhile, Cecilia quietly continued her work at Harvard, undertaking all the tasks as a professor, but only paid as a technical assistant, since Harvard did not permit women to be professors. A quarter century later, Cecilia was finally made a professor, and another quarter century after that, in 1976, Cecilia finally received credit for her groundbreaking work, ironically winning the Henry Norris Russell Prize. Let's turn our gaze. Let's look towards Charleston, South Carolina, in the time period just before Cecilia was beginning her work at Harvard. This southern port city had suffered tremendous damage during the Civil War and emerged from Reconstruction strictly segregated and harshly divided by class, but with a Black majority. In 1898, Septima Clark was born into a large family, the seventh of what would be 8 children. Her father, Peter, was enslaved at birth on a plantation, and once emancipated, worked as a waiter on a steamship that sailed between Charleston and Haiti. Her mother, Victoria, spent most of her girlhood in Haiti, only returning to Charleston after meeting Peter as a young woman. Peter could not read or write, as it had been illegal to teach these skills to an enslaved person. Victoria, however, had learned to read and write in Haiti and was determined her children would do the same, despite the racist structures within which they lived their lives. When Septima was born, Black citizens had very few rights, especially in South Carolina. The right to vote that Black men had gained during Reconstruction was rolled back by the state in the late 1800s, and segregated schools were mandated. As in many other locations at this time, Black teachers could not teach at white schools, but in Charleston, Black teachers could not teach at any public schools, whether they served white or Black students. Schools serving Black children were severely understaffed and underfunded. For example, in 1913, the state spent an average of almost $15 per white student, compared to less than $2 per Black student per year, despite South Carolina being a majority Black state. Motivated by her mother, Septima graduated from high school in 1916 and passed her teacher's exam. She accepted a teaching position at Promised Land School on Johns Island, a nearby rural district in which Black teachers were permitted to work. Septima worked tirelessly, not only in the classroom, but as an advocate for equality, pay equalization for teachers, the right for Black teachers to teach in Charleston public schools, and the right for all citizens to vote. Although Black men and women had the right to vote on paper at this time, they were often kept from the polls by literacy tests well into the 50s and 60s. Septima began a network of citizenship schools that taught Black adults to read and navigate voter registration forms. Her network of schools reached more than 25,000 students, led to twice that number of registered voters, and laid the groundwork for the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. referred to Septima as the mother of the movement. She used education to open the gates of democracy itself. Septima believed, and we believe, that education is not just about knowledge, but about liberation. Her father had always reminded her that she must see that there is something fine and noble in everybody, and Septima helped so many to see that in themselves. For our final woman today, let's return to the Northeast, to Manhattan. Born in the same decade as Septima, Suzanne Langer was raised right here on Manhattan's West Side by a German family. She was a student at Harvard at the same time as Cecilia Payne, but exploring philosophy, not astronomy. As a white woman from a well-to-do, culturally rich family, Suzanne was more easily able to access education than Septima, for example, but still found it challenging to navigate the male-dominated college. Suzanne's work in philosophy revolved around aesthetics and the philosophy of mind. While traditional philosophy at that time tended to treat language as the primary vehicle of thought, Suzanne emphasized that meaning does not live only in words, but in symbol, rhythm, art, and silence. These are ways that as humans we make sense of what cannot be fully said. There are things we understand deeply but cannot easily put into sentences, such as awe, longing, grief, and spiritual transcendence. As we most certainly know here, music and ritual can express these realities in ways that ordinary language cannot. We know that a chalice isn't just a candle, and that a ritual isn't just a habit, and that a story doesn't have to be true to communicate truth. But these were newer ideas in Suzanne's time. Suzanne was well known in her lifetime, actually, lecturing widely, selling many books, and influencing other scholars. But as philosophy later shifted towards increasingly technical and specialized topics, her broad interdisciplinary work became less fashionable, and though some of her ideas survived, she faded from collective memory. Even Zach, our favorite philosopher here, scratched his head when I asked about her. But I hope she will now become one of Zach's old friends. Speaking of Zach and his old friends, if you think back to the Robert Frost poem he read to you earlier, it evokes that feeling of trying to see through the picture or getting a glimpse beyond the picture. The four women we've spent some time with this morning have all helped us glimpse beyond. One illuminated beauty, one truth, one human possibility, and one meaning itself. Often the people who give the most light are not the ones history shines its spotlight upon, but it could, and we can. Thank you.